So we talked about this late last week, and I'm somewhat surprised that it hasn't gotten more attention and notoriety because it deals with player safety, player health, etc. Yesterday, the lawsuit between a former Penn State football team doctor and the university was, I don't want to say it was settled. It was adjourned, and the jury found the doctor. Yeah, he was fired from Penn State because he had went to the school to say, hey, James Franklin is interfering in my medical decision. So he says he was retaliated against by the school and by James Franklin and lost his job over it. And he won $5.25 million, which I don't think is a small sum of money. Now, at Penn State, $5.25 million is like emptying out the couch cushions. It's not a big deal. I'm sure they didn't have it in the budget to drop $5 million by losing a lawsuit. But that's neither here nor there. I legitimately, this isn't a, like, I hate the guy. Like, I admit when I have blind spots, right? Like, I don't like Dabo Swinney. I nothing James Franklin. Don't like him, don't dislike him. I think he's done a pretty good job at Penn State, all things considered. Have they been down in weird spots? Yes, but they've played in Rose Bowls. They should have probably played in a college football playoff, and I think are one of the biggest beneficiaries of an expanded college football playoff. It was going to be really difficult for Penn State to get in a 14 college football playoff, but a 12 team is going to change the perception of, I think, James Franklin in their program. With all that being said, I don't know how a jury finds that your university is liable for $5 million to a team doctor who says he got fired from his job because in retaliation for saying James Franklin is interfering with my medical treatment of my players. How James Franklin is coaching against West Virginia in the season opener. I'm not calling for the dude's head. I'm not saying that he should be fired, because very rarely will I do that. Very rarely will I sit here and say this person should no longer be employed at that university, because it's not my decision. I really hate the word should. Only I can figure out what should be done for me. Only you can figure out what should be the decisions that you make. So I can't sit here and opine on whether James Franklin should still be the head coach at Penn State or not. I think it's reasonable to point out somebody got fired. A jury found somebody got fired because you basically got them fired. And the reason you got them fired was because they had kids with concussions, and you were like, to hell with that, get them back into contact. A player had said he attempted suicide, and you thought, well, let's cut his ass so we can get an extra scholarship. I don't know how that person is the head coach of a team in the season opener, and whether I wouldn't be surprised if there was a suspension coming. I don't know that it's going to lead to James Franklin losing his job, because I don't think there's been a whole lot of public outcry for the situation, which is, I don't know how I feel about it. I would think that this would be and should be a big deal, right? That, like, the NCAA guarantees, obviously not, but guarantees that medical personnel have autonomy in their training rooms, doctors' offices, etc. That the schools, the universities, the coaches, athletic departments cannot interfere in those situations between a doctor and a player. And here, it certainly appears as if you've got a really clear-cut example that was not followed, and the repercussions are what? Nothing? Because I'm guessing, and I have said this time and time again, hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a plan. Penn State, I think their hope is that this doesn't gain much more traction, that nobody really picks this up and goes, well, wait a second. This is shady as hell. This shows a complete lack of character, integrity. This is everything that is wrong with college sports. And that's their hope. That's their plan right now. Their PR plan is like, I hope nobody picks this up and runs with it, because we look really bad in this situation, and so does our football coach. And that would be a nightmare for us to have to deal with. So let's just hope nothing happens. Because you know what? If they came out on Friday afternoon and said, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to suspend James Franklin for the first, 3 games of the college football season, or whatever the case may be. And I think their first 3 games, I'm going to look it up right now. It's West Virginia, Bowling Green, and I can't remember, UMass maybe. West Virginia, Bowling Green, Kent State is their non-conference. So they have 2 games, a bye week, and a 3rd game against Kent State. If they came out tomorrow and said, hey, due to the results of the lawsuit that a jury found that James Franklin got a team doctor fired because he was interfering with medical treatment, and the guy brought it to the university's attention. And because of those actions, because of that finding, we are going to suspend James Franklin for the first 3 games of the college football season. The story dies. Nobody says another word about it. There aren't going to be think pieces. There aren't going to be interviews on the local news or on ESPN. You're not going to be on First Take or Get Up or the Pat McAfee Show or First Things First or Skip Bayless isn't going to be talking. None of that happens if you just say, and I think, frankly, do the right thing and say, hey, your actions in this scenario were really unacceptable. Not cool. Not a good thing for the football program, the athletic department, the university, the state of Pennsylvania. None of this is good. And so, because of your actions, you're not going to coach against West Virginia. You're not going to coach against Bowling Green. You're not going to coach against Kent State. Nobody says another word. This story does not get out of the month of May if Penn State does that. But instead, when hope is your plan, and again, hope is not a plan. Hope sucks. If your PR strategy is, God, I hope nobody bitches about this too loudly, because then we might have to do something. Like, nothing shouts that you don't think you've done anything wrong when you were just found to have done something wrong. Now, I know that for some people, maybe a jury of your peers might not be the most entrusted organization, situation, etc. these days. But you got found out for firing a doctor who said, like, hey, James Franklin's doing some shady stuff in our program, and it's not supposed to be that way. And instead of taking action then, you fired the doctor. He took your ass to court, proved that you did it, apparently beyond a reasonable doubt. And now you're dealing with the consequences. This is really easy. It's really simple. I don't know how you ever lose sight of like what's right and what's wrong, how you get so laser focused in a college football world. And whether it's college football, whether it's any walk of life, I don't know how you lose sight of what is right and what is wrong to the point where somebody that you are entrusted with overseeing, managing, help develop, etc., whatever the case may be, when that person tells a medical professional, I tried to kill myself, and the head coach of that program views it as like a good thing, I'll never in a million years understand how you lose sight of that's a human being or what's right and what's wrong. Because what's wrong in that situation is to go, oh, well, that would, like, if we cut him, that would open up a scholarship, right? That is wrong. It's so undeniably wrong. It's so easy to see how wrong that is. And yet, and this isn't just a James Franklin thing. This happens literally every year in college sports, where some coach gets their proverbial dick in the proverbial meat grinder when it was so easy to not do that. where when presented with a situation of like, you can do what's right or you can do what's wrong, they do what's wrong. And when you do what's wrong, I can't sit here and say you should or should not be the head coach of that school anymore. I can say that a suspension because you fired a team doctor because they turned you in for doing shady shit should probably lead to a suspension of some kind or some sort of consequence, rather than just like maybe having to tell this orthopedic surgeon, like, hey, I'm sorry. There should be a little bit more than that. We should want more than that. You should expect more than that. What comes from that, I don't know. But I just don't know how, if you have any integrity, any character, any continue down that lineage, how you let that person coach your team against West Virginia on the first Saturday of the college football season. Maybe that's virtue signaling. Maybe that's grandstanding. Maybe that's pandering. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. I would be ashamed of my football program, athletic department, university that I like, follow, and love if somebody who did something like that got off with it scot-free, that there was no repercussions, there was no consequences to their actions when they did something inherently wrong. That's just my view on it. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. See you next time here on the Daily Huddle.